Okay, so we're gonna, just like the video we just published, we're gonna try something a little more different today. We're going back to the unscripted format. Instead of impressions, though, I was gonna try something a little more in-depth, as you would. It's a stupid overused phrase I have, but I want to do what the title will imply, a review and story discussion of Silent Hill Shattered Memories. Now, for sort of the botched pseudo-podcast video I did of the Western Silent Hill games earlier in the year, whenever this ends up coming out, I definitely kind of brushed over Shattered Memories. Like, I think I almost just relegate this game to, I don't know, like a paragraph at the very end. I really just brushed through it at the very end. It's just because, like, Shattered Memories didn't really fit the argument I was trying to make in that video. See, on paper it does. Like, one of the big complaints I had with the Western Silent Hill games was the whole therapy town idea. And if you want to see what I'm talking about and just kind of get my whole stance on Origins, Homecoming, and Downpour, check out the Western Silent Hill games. Where did they go wrong? It's every issue I have with them just on the table. But I didn't include this one for a reason. It's for the areas I think it does go wrong. This is the only one I can accept as a part of the Silent Hill series, and I could get into why, but I think arguing semantics about why this or that is a part of X series is kind of a waste of time. I don't know. But because someone commented on the stream I did of this game last year, actually, towards the end of it, asking, are you going to look at this as a full video? And I wondered, you know what? Yeah, what the hell? Obviously, it's going to be less structured, but we'll see where this goes. And again, review and story discussion. Spoilers ahead. I'm going to put a big warning when we actually get into the story proper. But you've been warned. If I let something slip by accident, it's going to happen. I'm probably not going to edit it out. One of the things of note, Shattered Memories, is this game's development. It's pretty well known that this started out as a completely different game in the Silent Hill series than the one we actually got. See, the original pitch for Shattered Memories was a game called Silent Hill Cold Heart, and it was going to be a brand new entry in the series, still developed for the Wii by Climax Studios, but we'll get into it. It was never supposed to be a remake of Silent Hill 1, which technically Shattered Memories is. It's complicated, we'll get to that, but the original premise of Cold Heart would follow a college student named Jessica Chambers who was going on vacation for the winter holidays and ends up trapped in Silent Hill. Some of the things that would carry over to the finished game would be things like checking doors, as you do in the final one, which generally useless, but you can kind of see where, with the idea of Cold Heart, which is going to be more traditional in its Silent Hill approach, fog world, otherworld, enemies everywhere, combat, etc., checking the doors makes a little more sense in context to that. However, the big thing that was going to be continuous between both of them was the psychiatry sessions. That was you could tell that was definitely the passion project. The big thing they wanted to have in Cold Heart, because it's the one major feature that was brought over to Shattered Memories. We'll get to it when we get to it, but when we go back to Cold Heart here, just the gameplay, the best way I can put it is, it's very easy to feign nostalgia or like what could have been for unmade video games. Kind of like the Horror in Daylight RE5 pitch before we just got Resident Evil 4 with co-op. That was the finished game, which isn't bad, mind you, but I think it is very easy to look at something like that on pitch and wane sorrow for, oh, what could have been had we gotten this, However, the more I read, I'll post the actual design talk that was released in the link of the video. From what I've read, I think Cold Heart would have been an absolute fucking failure. It would have fallen flat on its fucking face, probably the worst game in the series, for the single purpose, and probably the reason that I think another bomb in the survival horror genre that came out in 2008, the Alone in the Dark reboot, same reason that game sucks. holy shit does this game not understand scope. So Shattered Memories, as we got it, it's very clearly not the highest budget game in the world. It's not the most gameplay focused. And it's a little jank when it does try to be gameplay focused. But it knows its limits and it plays within it. And I think that was a strength of Shattered Memories. Cold Heart wanted to have a frostbite system, multiple layers of clothing to prevent hypothermia, frostbite, any weather-related damages. It wanted to have the said layering up system act as an inventory. It wanted to have actual combat based on motion controls entirely. So on and so forth. It wanted to have, like, the thing that really got to me was it wanted to have interactions with townsfolk or people in Silent Hill, and you'd use the Wiimote to interact with them, to emote with them, to point at things, to shake yes or no in the middle of active conversation, not at prompt points. The whole thing just sounds way too ambitious for the tech that they had and the ability of Climax Studios, if I'm being fucking blunt about it. Like, I think this game would have fallen flat on its face if it was allowed to come out the way it was. Now, granted, I think in the best case scenario, if they managed to execute everything they put in the design doc and do it well, I think potentially it could have been a better game. The difference would be, I'd say, yeah, it's just ideally Cold Heart would be better than Shattered Memories. However, the execution I think is just way too ambitious to do. And what we got has it has limits, but it can work within those limits. And I think it gave us a stronger project in the end. That's just me though. I don't know, that's really all there is to talk about Cold Heart. Obviously the winter theme carried over, but that's mostly just an aesthetic thing in Shattered Memories, and a bit of a narrative one. We'll get to it. I have some things to say about the whole snow, weather, and ice concept, but whatever. Let's actually get into Shattered Memories, the game itself. Like, what, 7, 8 minutes? Yeah, almost 8 minutes in? Great. So, let's just talk about the gameplay. I'll readily admit, the gameplay is one of the weaker parts of Shattered Memories. It's unfortunately true, but what are you gonna do? The chases are not engaging. This is the big make or break. See, in Shattered Memories, there's two states to the traditional fog world, otherworld concept. You have the fog world, which is entirely free of enemies or combat of any kind, and then you have the other world, which is only enemies and encounters. And I say encounters because there's no combat in this game. You run away. On paper, this isn't the worst idea in the world. I think removing combat from Silent Hill it's not necessarily bad. I get why people don't like it. I maintain the combat of the series is serviceable. Of 1 to 3, it was always serviceable. Mostly because, flight was always a viable option anyway, so what are you gonna do? But I'm gonna be honest, the implementation here is just not great, because the Otherworld goes from being something that you have to methodically explore the way you did the Fog World. It's just a warped, hellish version of it. It goes from that, and it just becomes almost this roller coaster ride of just sprint to the end, go in all directions, monsters in every angle. I don't know, and it also just takes a lot of the tension out of the Fog World, because, you're safe. Nothing's gonna happen, hence why the door opening mechanic makes no goddamn sense in the finished product. It's a common criticism, but it's common because it's kind of true. It's a weird contrast. I don't know. And on top of that, some of the other worlds towards the end can kind of be a pain in the ass, because everything is blue. And if everything is just blue hallways and stretched industrial areas, eventually it just kind of gets hard to navigate. I think the mall and the hospital are probably the two most annoying other worlds in the game. They're more confusing than the intentionally confusing impossible space, I guess that's the equivalent of Nowhere, where that takes place in. But yeah, the mall especially is fucking mean, man. Especially the puzzle where you have to get the 4 color-coded gumballs in order of the colors of the Toucan Sam beak. That's super fucking mean, especially considering how early in the level that Toucan statue is in comparison to where the puzzle's located, and you have to go back for that if you don't know what you're doing. Fucking mean, dude, but, you know, it's what it is. It's the only example of that in the game where the puzzles really aren't straightforward, because another criticism that is brought up by detractors of the game, and I don't disagree with, is, you know, Shattered Memories does kind of feel, just in terms of gameplay, not in terms of thematic quality, storytelling, anything else, it kind of feels like baby's first survival horror. There's some good puzzles here, but for the most part, it's just Wii motion control gimmicks. The inventory is just gone completely, so there's no resource management aspect to it at all. The combat's gone, which is itself kind of just taking away a lot of the teeth. And there's really not a lot of exploration in this one. It's a straight line for the most part from beginning to end. I'm not complaining, it keeps the game focused, and you can tell it was not trying to have any sort of exploration or mimic the Silent Hill style of exploration, unlike a Downpour or an Origins or a Homecoming, which tried to emulate it and failed. This isn't even trying, which you can argue if that's good or bad, but I don't think it's fair to criticize it the same way because it's not making an attempt, if that makes any sense. However, in general, yes, this is an easy game, easy life. And because of that, it's not that scary. A lot of the horror falls flat because the in-game justification for the horror just doesn't really work. It's got its moments, but on top of that, I don't think Shattered Memories is like intentionally supposed to be upfront horror the way even like a Silent Hill 1 was supposed to be. We'll get to it though. We'll get to it. Shattered Memories is more of a sad game than anything else. We'll get there when we do. But at the end of the day, even with all these criticisms, even with everything on the table, Shattered Memories never annoyed me. Outside of that one Toucan puzzle, which is fucking mean, but if you know what's gonna come, you know, just use the smartphone, take a picture, then go to the puzzle. So you kind of know what to do if you played the game already. And we'll get to one thing I do find interesting. Excuse me, I just had a complete lapse of thought just looking at my notes here. Again, it's rarely annoying, so the gameplay does not get in the way of what truly matters here, which is everything else, basically. There's some really clever additions to the gameplay, though. The phone. I mentioned you can take pictures with the phone for the puzzles. This is where it does good work. The phone is a great fucking addition. Sure, like, it kind of landlocks it in time to being after around around the time it was released, like 2009-ish, like when smartphones became regular use in our lives. But, so it's like, yeah, it kind of loses the whole pseudo-timeless aspect of Silent Hill 1 to 3, where it's intentionally ambiguous what time they take place in. I don't know, but that being said, I think the phone as it's implemented is a really clever way to put the map, the in-game notes, and something of a character codec where you can speak to other characters throughout the town with it. So you can have those interactions with them over the phone. However, what's interesting is that because there is that distance, and because the phone's not exactly reliable since it's also the radio, letting you know when shit's going bad, I think it actually kind of helps this game's sense of loneliness. Like, you still have frequent enough character interactions, but there's long stretches of complete isolation of perfectly preserved but abandoned places. If nothing else, like, this is not a scary game. This is an atmospheric and an eerie one, though. It really does have this unsettling atmosphere of being completely alone in a place that should be populated. Like, the mall closed in the middle of the day. Like, I don't know. It's very good stuff overall. Well, basically that's just a long way getting around it. Like, I think the game has good atmosphere. We'll touch more on the atmosphere in a bit here, but whatever, that's the gameplay. Going on to the audio. This is one of the game's stronger aspects, actually. I think this is with little doubt in my mind, the best voice cast in any of the Silent Hill games. Everyone here is doing a good job. I can't think of a single weak performance. Everyone manages to feel natural, and even with natural sounding voice acting, they still manage to deliver the common sentiment about like the Silent Hill 2 voice acting, just off the top of my head, that it's eerie and uncanny and doesn't sound quite right, so it's spooky. I think this does exactly that, while on the whole, having mostly better performances than Silent Hill 2, I'd easily Silent Hill 1, 2, and even 3, I mean, honest. I don't really count the ones after that, but, you know, whatever. That's me being petty. I don't know. The characters, I think what makes it work is that because every voice actor is giving such a natural performance, that when you have these people giving natural reactions, unfazed to anything, to completely impossible situations, that helps that uncanny valley feeling. And again, it adds the sense of loneliness. Who the fuck can Harry talk to about anything that's happening when everyone just seems like, okay, early on when he's speaking to Sybil, he'll have a throwaway line depending on what Harry characterization you have at that point, wondering where the fuck is everyone around town? Like, this is supposed to be like a decently populated place. Where the hell is everyone? Sybil's answer to that, I'm just fucking umming and on over myself, but Sybil's answer to that is, it's the middle of the worst blizzard we've had in years. Calm down, it's fine. But still, like, no one? And Sybil just doesn't react. She completely no-sells it in a very believable but still eyebrow-raising way. Cool shit. Super cool shit. And the game also has, outside of the really high-quality voice acting, it has a really interesting use of low-quality audio. A lot of the audio used for the raw shocks, for the ghosts, for all those kind of things, the radio, this weird low-quality humming, it does add kind of this, it's a little unsettling, like, hearing the radio just start to scream when you find a solution for the first time, it admittedly got me when I first played this game. And also the really interesting use of, like, the raw shocks having low-quality children's screams as they follow you. It's a little weird, kind of eerie. Eerie is how I describe most of this game's creepier moments. I don't know. And again, the low-quality audio, though, it does help with the game's whole home movie VHS aesthetic, which I don't think it entirely nailed, but I know why they had it, and thematically I can appreciate the direction they went with it. And also, like, it's impossible to talk about the audio of Shattered Memories without talking about Akira Yamaoka's final soundtrack for Silent Hill. This was the last work he was to ever do on the series, and even though I should preface at the time of this recording, I'm pretty fucking confident it's the last time he's ever going to work on the series. It's dead, get over it, but I gotta say, this is one hell of a last hurrah by him. This has some of my favorite songs in a Silent Hill game, period. Everything works well from... It's this perfect mixture of what I liked about Silent Hill 2's soundtrack with 3's. It carries the 2 aspect where everything is... every song and piece of audio complements the atmosphere of the scene it takes place in. Everything is complementary. On the flip side of that, the tracks that are intended to be listened to on their own, like Silent Hill 3's, they sound great to listen to on their own. This has easily the best collection of vocal tracks in any of the games. Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, she knocked it out of the fucking park with this one. Hell Frozen Rain, best track in the Silent Hill game, at least best vocal track. Hands down, fucking fight me. That song is a banger. And I do also find one thing interesting, though. For fans of this game who kind of want a little bit more experience, a little more content to consume with it, the official soundtrack release of Shattered Memories, which you can now listen to online for like Spotify or something for free. Don't pay for a membership for Spotify, by the way. But For the official soundtrack release, it's actually somewhat different to the in-game release that we're mostly familiar with. It's higher quality, there's some more instruments added to the instrumentals. I would highly recommend giving it a listen if you are at all interested in this kind of stuff. Very, very cool. Moving on to the visuals, I really don't have that much to say on it. I will say this is a bad instance of porting, because the footage you're going to be looking at is the PS2 port, which is the copy I own physically, and that's how I played it for the streams, but I think the biggest problem is, like, the PS2 port is such a clear visual downgrade from the Wii. It has sharp, blocky, kind of pixelated textures. It has removed assets. It's such a sharp... It has, like, terrible fucking slowdown, too. If you go to a door, it is the worst port of the game. Apparently, even the PSP port looks and runs better than this. It's kind of embarrassing, but I don't know. But, you know, outside of the port shenanigans, if you can emulate this on Wii, or if you're a lucky enough bastard to have a working Wii and somehow find an affordable copy of Shattered Memories, because this game goes for like $100 plus now, you're going to be treated to easily the best looking of the Western Silent Hill games. This has some of the best character animation of its generation. And that's not saying a lot, because, like, what else did it really have to compete with in the late 2000s? But this game has, like, again, great character animation, great facial animation. For a Wii game, I was not expecting that. And obviously they kind of had to nail it based on how they did a lot of the cutscenes of first person. You can zoom in on the characters' faces. You can tell they really wanted to nail it just because of that, but they did a decent job. Like, I don't know, like, characters can just move and express little bits of personality, especially the psychiatrist Kaufman. Like, how flippant he can get just with his mannerisms. He's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of effort that clearly went into it. I don't know if this is motion capture. I would be surprised if it wasn't, though. It's quite good. And just speaking aesthetically, I don't really have much to say. It looks nice. I think the raw shocks are a little boring. I understand, like, visually they're kind of an allusion to the Gray Children from Silent Hill 1, but I think they kind of suck. Even with the whole they change their appearance based on your psych answers. I think it's a little weak, honestly, and they don't change very nearly enough. Like, I think the one Rawshock design that's kind of cool is the very abstract one, but I never get that one. The one where they're just blocky and they have, like, air and empty space between their limbs on some of them, like they're fucking Monsoon from Revengeance. Like, that's actually the best visual design they get, and I have no idea how to get that. Like, my personality profile apparently does not match them, so what are you gonna do? And I will say, like, this is one of the best Otherworlds in the series. I like the Otherworld a lot on its own visually. I think the frozen overworld idea is a fascinating one, and it's interesting, and it's really, I keep talking over myself, sorry, but it's a really interesting way to justify in-game restrictions. Like, you can't go this way. Why? Because there's a gigantic wall of ice blocking this building off. Like, it's a pretty fun way to kind of have the in-game invisible walls not dealt with and explained. However, the real reason I am such a fan of this Otherworld is for story reasons. We'll get to story reasons. Obviously, we'll save it, and we'll get to those in a second here, actually, so final warning. If you have any interest in playing Shattered Memories at all, one, you shouldn't have been watching this at all. Shame on you. But if you still are watching, and you still have interest in playing the game for the first time, you are somehow not spoiled on this, like, over a decade since it's come out, like, going on 12 years, actually. And you can still go in blind. Somehow still can? Stop here, okay? Just nothing I say will provide anything of value going in, because I'm just gonna spoil it immediately. You've been warned. No excuses. It's been almost a minute of me trying to warn you, saying go play it on your own if you're interested. Okay? Fine. If you're still here, only yourself to blame. So, getting into the storytelling, it's impossible to talk about Shattered Memories without getting to the ending. Because this is a story... Okay, so there's two thoughts in storytelling that you hear a lot. It's the ending is the most important part, or the ending is just an ending and it's the journey getting there. Both schools have their merits. I've seen good stories ruined by terrible endings. I've seen good stories have terrible endings, but, you know, it's what it is, right? The ending of Shattered Memories is vital to appreciating and understanding it. It's an ending that makes the total experience better. And, I mean, let's be blunt. The whole, they were dead the whole time twist is so fucking formulaic. It's done so often. Some variant of it was all a dream is a cliche for a reason. Because it's usually fucking cheap, let's be real. This is not an example of it. Well, one, because this was written explicitly with the idea of it was all a dream, X was dead the whole time in mind. So, there's execution in that, but the specific, there's no but here. The specific execution is what makes it. Okay, and I'm talking over myself. I'm excited to be talking about this. I'm very into it. But the thing is, there's actually a fair bit of foreshadowing to what the ending is. And if you're one of those psychopaths who is still watching despite not knowing what it is, I'll just explain one bit of foreshadowing. During one of the psych assessments, the psychiatrist, Kaufman, will ask you, okay, yes or no, which of these described you in high school? And he'll give you a bunch of descriptors like nerd, bully, jock, etc. One of them is, were you a slut? Now, I'll fully admit I'm a fucking idiot because I didn't even register that on my first playthrough. But that is a fascinating term, because your assumption is it's Harry Mason, the protagonist you've been playing the whole game as, in the psychiatrist seat, being analyzed and in therapy or counseling. Here's the thing. Slut is such an uncommon word to be associated with men. Make of that what you will. Like, that's a completely different conversation about, if that's right or not. But fact of the fucking matter is, men are not called sluts. It's not a term applied to men. However, your assumption is you're playing as Harry, so that's an excellent bit of foreshadowing that the character in the psych chair is not Harry Mason. It's his adult daughter, Cheryl Mason, who he spent the whole game looking for, because Harry Mason is dead, and all of this is just a fucking thought exercise in her head. There you go. Drop the ending. Now, I think the scene itself is what makes the ending work. I said this game had pretty good voice acting. I think the psychiatrist at the very end, when Kaufman is going off on his rant at the very end, just fed the fuck up with Cheryl's delusions up to that point. That is some fucking thumbs up voice acting. That is really good stuff. I mean, I could just talk praise about it all day. I just love the execution of that scene, and over his shoulder, Harry Mason walks in, and then you see you sitting in the chair. It's so fucking well done. Words won't do it justice. I'm talking over myself. My god. 4 cups of coffee. Again, it's a good speech. It lays out a lot of the themes of the game. The whole home, the whole pale freaks just sitting at home, watching home movies on loop. Again, which is also a part of the home movie aesthetic, that actually does express a lot of the themes that Shattered Memories is about, which is being stuck in the past, looping bits of it in your mind over and over. Very good shit. However, Shattered Memories, even with the plot twist, it's not a plot story, it's a character story. And the only real way to talk about my stance on it is to talk about the characters individually. Which sounds a little weird in theory, because with the ending, you're essentially just given the reveal that there's only 2 characters in the story at all. It's Dr. Kaufman and Cheryl Mason. It's kind of hard to justify talking about them all individually, because, well, there's only 2. Everyone else is just a figment of Cheryl's imagination. Whether she's entirely aware of it or not. Up to you. But I think we'll start with Kaufman and we'll go with Cheryl later. I do have a question. Quick question, just, I don't have an answer. And if you got a theory, put it in the comments, let me know. What is the timeline of Cheryl seeing Kaufman? Like, how long has she been seeing him? How soon after the crash has she been seeing him? How many months or years or sessions had she spent with him specifically? I'm not quite sure. I think the easy answer is she's an adult the whole time that they've been talking. And I think the very first tutorial little psych quiz where he says, we'll do it your way. No drugs, no pills, whatever. And he gives you that little questionnaire. Some of that questionnaire has some risque fucking material on it. So... But the thing is, I say this because there's a very interesting progression in the tone Kaufman has as these therapy sessions goes on. Look at his early sessions. The one I'm most familiar with is the coloring activity. Look at his line delivery there. The way he's just so composed, so very soft-spoken. Just wondering, is your home like the one you've colored? It's such a lovely drawing. Is your home like this as well? He's so fake. You can tell he's putting on a voice and an act there. So it just makes me kind of curious of how old is Cheryl in that sequence? Because, I'm not exactly the most educated man in the world and kind of fucking dipshit, but... I don't think it's very common in therapy sessions for the shrink to completely baby you and not talk to you if you're an adult as an adult at all, and then make you do a coloring activity and in this sing-songy voice wonder, was your home like this as well? Or I'd have to go back. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. I'm wondering, is the line he says there, was your family home like this, or is your family home like this as well? Because if it's the present tense, that adds some ambiguity to when this is taking place. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of interesting, especially with how he seems to get fed up with each session, where he's getting a little more... He's getting a little rowdier. He's getting a little more unhinged. He's kind of treating it all as a joke. He's bringing his personal life into it. He's challenging you. He's antagonizing you. I really like that. I like how you get more of his character as it goes on. He's a divorcee, cynical as fuck. He probably has a drinking problem, if we're being honest. But the thing that I like about Kaufman most is the game doesn't try to pull the rug out from under you by making him some sort of antagonist. The thing with Kaufman that could have been so fucking easy is they make it like, I don't know, he's fucking doinking Cheryl or something. When we were watching the stream, actually, this is funny, a friend of mine in the stream, he commented and asked, he had no knowledge of the game, by the way. He was wondering, okay, so is it gonna straight up just come out that the psychiatrist is a huge dickhead? Because a lot of it seems to be pointing towards that. You get lore notes of illicit relationships, some of the lore notes, texts and voice messages being about illicit relationships between an older man and a younger woman. So he kind of put two and two together. It's like, okay, hold up. Is he gonna just come out and be like a fucking, just a perv or something? And considering how much he talked about sex, it didn't really help his case, but I really appreciate how they didn't take the quick and easy path there. Because it would have been so easy to just make the Shrink the villain, and Kaufman was a villain in Silent Hill 1, so you could honestly kind of argue it's a bit of an intentional red herring using that character again. And also not kind of a villain, he's a huge piece of shit, so what am I saying? But you could argue how much of that was intentional, how much of that was a red herring. But outside of, like, as we described, his fucked up traits of he's a little rowdy, kind of cynical, divorcee, maybe an alcoholic, who knows. Despite all of that, the one consistent trait that even when he has the fake mask on of the soft-spoken counselor, he gives a shit. And I can tell, you can definitely tell Kaufman, above all else, gives a fuck about his patients. Specifically in this case Cheryl, but if he's willing to go to bat for Cheryl, I'm pretty sure he'd do it for anyone else, because there's no implication he has any sort of attraction to her, like a lot of the older man, younger woman lore notes and side stories imply. Nah, there's no implication at all of him having that. He's not exactly he's not exactly a professional, but he's damn good at what he does, basically. And I think that's why the scene at the end of him just breaking down works as well as it does. It's clearly coming from someone who is invested in his patient's well-being, but god fucking damn it, the official channels aren't working. What my degree said would work, what the textbook said would work, none of that shit's working. And you can tell he's been stewing on this shit. Very early on, you see him just pour a drink before what's implied to be Cheryl is going to come in for the session at the very beginning of the game. He's so fucking done at that point that it's just, throw the drink at the wall, wake the fuck up. And I really appreciate that it's clear, even as harsh as it sounds, it's coming from someone who is a genuinely good person. Very interesting detail. There's no villains in this game. No one is a bad person in this game at all. Of all the main cast, they're all just people. Varying degrees of good people. Sometimes they change based on your own in-game behavior, but no one is a bad person here. There are no antagonists. I like that. I like that a lot. It is a compelling story without, dickheads in it, basically. But yeah, that's Kaufman. There's not much to him, but we get just enough to where I think he is very interesting. He's a good character, good tool to explore more about Cheryl specifically. We'll move on though. Now, everyone else is basically just, as we see them, they are just characters inside of Cheryl's head. I think it's most likely that they are based on people Cheryl knew in her life. You could argue, I know one of the endings has Michelle and Lisa be two women that Harry slept with, so make of that what you will about what their relevance was, because there's no real canon ending, so who knows. And obviously the Dahlia in-game is based on Dahlia, Harry's wife in this version, and Cheryl's mom, and maybe some others, we'll get to that, but I think it's fair to say that the characters as we see them are reflective of something about Cheryl, because we only see Cheryl or really hear from her a couple lines at the very end. So to infer about Cheryl, we have to talk about the characters as a whole. And we've been almost going for 40 minutes. I'm just looking at my time scale. I am so sorry for rambling. I'm just into this. I'm having a good time. So, yeah. Let's start with Harry, because like his Silent Hill 1 counterpart, I don't think there's a lot to Harry as a character. The biggest thing is, on paper I'd say this is a detriment, but I think it can work in execution, is Harry's personality is always pretty flat, it's pretty two-dimensional, but it changes based on your own actions. He's supposed to reflect your choices, your decisions, your in-game behavior. To my knowledge, in just a off-the-cuff example, depending on how long you take trying to find Cheryl and do the objective in the very first zone of the game, you'll either go to the diner and talk to a cop about trying to find her, Or if you take too long, you fuck around too much, you'll unlock the bar across the street. Just to kind of imply what kind of person your Harry would be. It's definitely taking the whole multiple endings concept from Silent Hill 2. I think it's... I'd hesitate to say it's doing it better, but I've never been the biggest fan of how Silent Hill 2 seems to change aspects of James's motivation depending on the ending. We'll get to it when we get to Silent Hill 2. I have complicated thoughts on the whole thing. Very conflicting thoughts, not complicated. I'm not some fucking savant about Silent Hill or whatever. Or maybe I am, who knows? Ooh, you be the judge. But the thing is with Harry is that regardless of how he is characterized in your game for your playstyle, Harry is essentially just Cheryl's avatar for her need for a father figure. Notice how regardless of what personality Harry has, he has one dominant trait that supersedes all of them. He is there for his daughter. He is always focusing on Cheryl, always after Cheryl. Even if you get the horn dog Harry, the one who's just trying to like ogle and doink every chick he sees, his one objective is to try to find Cheryl, and he will gladly turn down a lot just to get that done. Very interesting trait, and it's very similar to what Harry was in the first Silent Hill, where he is just hell-bent on getting his kid back. In Silent Hill 1, it's because he's kind of admittedly a very flat, nothing character with very little going for him. But in Shattered Memories, this works because this is not Harry the man. This is the exact hero fantasy wish fulfillment avatar that Cheryl would want her father to be. Because it's like as Kaufman says at the end, how many 8-year-olds really know who their parents are anyway? I forget the specific line, something like that, but it's true. When you're that young, do you really know your family? Really? It's a bit of a tragic thought, but I think it works well here because, no, Cheryl never knew Harry at all. She has built this fake hero in her mind for decades at that point. And you can tell, she straight up worships the guy. I think the art gallery in the high school segment is one of the better instances of this, where it is nothing but Harry. Statue of Harry, paintings of Harry, all the fucking time with her. Because daddy's come to save her, and she loves her daddy. It's even down to the very beginning of the fucking game, where you have on loop at the little amusement park VHS tape of I love my daddy, rewind. I love my daddy, rewind. You have that at the very beginning of the game, and you have that during the Nowhere equivalent. It's extreme fixation on this fantasy of a father, which again, the game spells out, so I'm not saying anything unique or profound here. But the question is, how much of this is father need, and how much of this can you also stem to, as gross as this is to say out loud, something of kind of the debunked Electra complex idea. Now, I just want to say right off the bat, okay, Freud's concept of the Electra complex is so fucking stupid when you actually break it down and read it. It's absolute dog shit. Don't bother. There is no academic credibility to it. That's on the table, okay? But for this specific character and this specific story within this context, we'll talk about this idea of how much of this is almost like this, as she grew up, this almost new erotic fixation on I need dad, I need him. It's where her relationship with the high school teacher comes from, which is an aspect of the lore. At least, it looks familiar, but if the person in the pictures that you take during the other world in high school is supposed to be emblematic of her having an illicit affair with a teacher who is, in the words of the text message, old enough to be her father, how much of that does stem from the fucking daddy issues tag? I don't know. It's also worth noting how similar Dahlia, the young Dahlia, looks to Heather. Or Cheryl, excuse me. I'm gonna be saying that a lot. She looks a lot like fucking Cheryl. Cheryl in Silent Hill Shattered Memories looks like Heather, who was Cheryl in Silent Hill 3. Confused yet? Don't worry. Welcome to Silent Hill. But speaking of Dahlia, I think we should actually move on to her next. That feels like a natural way to progress here. Dahlia is a bit of an odd character, because she's both a stand-in for her real-life mother, who is, like, I think the fact that she's never actually referenced or spoken of that much outside of this weird Dahlia character, who, if anything, is more emblematic of Cheryl than she is Dahlia the mom IRL. I think it just kind of goes to show, like, maybe the relationship probably wasn't bad. And if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've listened to it word for word, but Kaufman at the very end even says, like, no, your mother's not a monster, she's not an asshole, she's not a jerk ass or whatever. Your mother loves you too. She's outside, come on, get your shit together. But I think you can imply, like, they probably just don't have a great relationship, period, because she doesn't factor into Cheryl's mind much at all, outside of the Dahlia in-game, who, if anything, is an allegory for Cheryl herself. Look at that fucking design and tell me that that is not intended to look like Cheryl. Two of the three, the punk one, the one who names her tits Sid and Nancy, which, pro tip lads, if you meet a girl who names her tits Sid and Nancy, you either run away or you marry her on the spot. And the metalhead one, who's kind of got the camo pants. Both of them look almost exactly like the Cheryl you see at the very end of the game and throughout pictures in the game itself. And it's also worth noting that, actually, no, it's not worth noting yet. Let's actually go through my fucking points on the checklist here. Moving on, dumbass. Alright. But, and here's the thing, even the blonde, of the three that you can get, the blonde Dahlia, she looks still more like Cheryl in facial structure than she does in Dahlia, the actual mother of Cheryl. I don't know, it's a very weird detail. Now, getting to what I was saying just a second ago, though, all versions of the character are presented as somewhat shitty and rebellious, and it is worth noting that I think this is a better reflection of Cheryl, because that's kind of how Cheryl was, at least implied. Like, we get a picture at the end where, what's her name? Sybil. Fucking forgot Sybil's name. I am a real Silent Hill fan. I love video games and Hill Silent, my favorite video game series. But you get a text at the very end from Sybil, being like, "Is this the little girl you're talking about?" And she has like a Portland, probably like an Oregon police record of her in a lineup. So it's somewhat implied, like, with the implication of the relationship with the teacher and with the arrest records and everything, and some other things along the way. This is not a stream. The stream has more of the moment-to-moment thoughts, basically, but in summary, it's pretty easy to say that Cheryl was a troubled youth after the accident, and took it out in ways like that. Similar to how you have implied delinquent Cheryl, drinks and drives like an idiot, like, will just rip the wheel from people's fucking hands. Doesn't pay attention to the road. Just talks about, oh my god, so wasted, XOXO. Like, just kind of wasting life away. And that leads us to the one aspect I'm not quite sure about. It's I keep saying young Dahlia, and that's because there's a scene where she will age forward to become an older Dahlia. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I have something of an idea, and this is gonna be a fucking stretch, so everyone just kind of limber up, because we're going to be really stretching and reaching for theories and answers here, but I kind of have to wonder if there's if it's any coincidence that the Green Lion antique shop that Dahlia in Silent Hill 1, the original, owned, is now the Green Lion pawn shop, which has used things from people's past, which Dahlia, the elder Dahlia now, older Dahlia, now lives above. And it's implied that she seems to live alone, have a really toxic kind of past relationship with Harry Mason, and is just like, she's lost her looks, she just lives above a pawn shop. Maybe that's where she works. I'm wondering if this has something to do with Cheryl's own subconscious fears of what she could end up like on her current path, whether she wants to admit it or not. Just ending up alone, not much to show for it, and fixated and living above or within just objects of the past, mementos. Why the mementos are the items that you collect throughout the game. Just fixated on the past that in reality other people have let go of, but has become her life. Similar to how the past of the trauma of losing her father in the accident is the thing she now cannot let go of. It is the past she needs to get out of her life. And I'm wondering if old Dahlia is how she fears she'll end up when her youth leaves her and she has almost nothing to show for it, because she's been living in the past since then. I don't know. I don't know. It's flimsy, I admit it, but I don't know. I don't have all the answers here, and the developers have basically said, fuck it. Theorize and theory craft your heart's content. It doesn't mean anything anyway, so I don't know. If you think you got an answer to the Dahlia question, let me know. It's also worth noting that Dahlia is in a relationship with Harry and fucks him on the boat. The Dahlia who looks suspiciously like Cheryl, so put that in the column for the daddy issues. Moving on to Lisa. Now, Lisa's a weird one. She is very out of place, I want to say, but okay, so Shattered Memories is to some degree a remake of Silent Hill 1, and that's why Lisa's here. Lisa was a major character in Silent Hill 1. And spoilers for Silent Hill 1, I'm going to put a timestamp on the screen you're looking at right now. Skip to there if you have not played Silent Hill 1 and don't want to be spoiled on that game. But Lisa's gimmick in Silent Hill 1 is that essentially she is... Look, I'm just kind of talking over myself. She is an imaginary person. Lisa Garland in Silent Hill 1 is a figment of Alessa Gillespie, however you pronounce it, a figment of her imagination. And she becomes self-aware of that as the game progresses. The problem is, when you think about it, most of the cast of Shattered Memories is that. They fill the same role, so Lisa no longer has that unique angle that put her apart from everyone else. I don't know. So in that regard, it does feel like Lisa's just kind of a holdover from the game being a remake. It's like, well, fuck, we gotta have Lisa Garland here. But I digress. I don't have much to say on Lisa outside of that. However, I do think it is somewhat interesting. She dies of the exact same injury that Harry seems to die of in not only the implied to be the opening of Shattered Memories, which I'm wondering if that's supposed to be how Harry actually died, or if he died at the very end when you see in the best ending, when you see the final meeting of him and his wife of, we've already said enough, and he looks at his daughter, he's like, no, sweetie, don't record this, mommy and daddy love you, all that shit. Is after that, is Cheryl in the car and they drive away, and Harry dies there? Or is the scene at the very beginning of the game where Harry crashes in snow, is that how Harry died? I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's worth noting that regardless, he dies of a crash and a head injury. And Lisa dies the same way. Somewhat. Like, she crashes, has a head injury, she hemorrhages, and she dies. Visual allusion to how Lisa kind of melted in the original Silent Hill. Also reference to how Harry died in this dream scenario. Okay, interesting. It also does raise the question, though. I'm gonna say this because this isn't really spoilers for Silent Hill 1, but in the really, really bad ending of Silent Hill 1, it's revealed that Harry Mason died in a car crash that the game opened with. He hit his head. I believe he's actually bleeding from the head in that scene. So he died of a very similar injury to Lisa here and Harry in Shared Memories, and it's revealed that basically all the game was a dying hallucination of his. The question then becomes, okay, would you say that Shattered Memories is a sequel to the bad ending of Silent Hill 1? And not entirely a remake, just a sequel to that? It's worth considering. I've heard it thrown around. I'm not sure it really matters, and it's kind of like arguing semantics, since at the end of the day, whether or not you see it as its own thing or a sequel to the bad end of Silent Hill 1, I think at the end of the day it's the same thing, but it is kind of interesting. Just keep that in mind. I don't know. At the end of the day, I have almost nothing to say on Lisa, but it was a nice inclusion, and I think the scenes with her are pretty entertaining, and they show off the game's writing, which I haven't really spoken of yet, but the game's has quite a good script writing. Sam Barlow, the guy who wrote this, he did quite a good job. The character interactions are quite natural feeling. And whether or not the characters, depending on your actions, are antagonistic to each other or friendly, it comes across real. And that's really the way I'd put it, is that every interaction and piece of dialogue just feels natural. None of it feels forced or like intentionally uncanny or kind of hammy in a weird way. It all feels right, basically. And for a video game, that's kind of hard to do. Or at least it's just something that's not done often, especially around this time. Alright, let's move on to Sybil. If Sybil Bennett in this game represents anything, I think she represents the rational part of Cheryl's mind. That's, that kind of knows. Not all this dad's alive, all this dad is a hero thing, it's all been bullshit. And I think, it's like, notice how Sybil is always from the very beginning trying to figure out Harry's deal. From the very first moment they meet, just like, okay, what's the deal with this guy? What's going on here? And as the game goes on, she's finding out more and more, and is trying to just talk about it. And notice how the otherworld transitions are linked for the most part to Sybil. Not all of them, obviously. A lot of them are, though. And a lot of the other ones are also linked to other things. Like when you first meet Sybil, and she's figured, I'm gonna look into you, I'm gonna try to help find her daughter. Shortly after that, you get the first otherworld scene. You have the hospital, where she's wheeling Harry away. It's just, I pulled the file on Harry Mason down at the station. World freezes over, otherworld begins. And then you get the real stinger of, I know you're not Harry Mason. World freezes over. Which is a great fucking scene, by the way, when Lisa dies. Such good shit. But there's otherworld transitions which are kind of similar, like the high school where you learn that Cheryl is not as young as Harry seemed to believe, and is a high school graduate now. What have you, but I don't know, like, I think, like, it is somewhat sound of Sybil being the rational part, trying to either figure out the source of the delusion or trying to break it. However, I do want to take this time, since a lot of the Otherworld is linked to Sybil, to talk about kind of my reading of what the Otherworld means. Because essentially, with the Otherworld, for me, like, what the symbolism of it is to Cheryl is that the world completely freezes in time. It's not just frozen over. It literally freezes because it's just covered in ice. But if you pay close attention, and the PS2 port, it's hard to see this, but in the Wii port, you can really see it. The snow particles stop completely. It stops snowing. The snow is just frozen and stuck in the air. So it's almost as if time itself is frozen with the ice, and the whole world is just caught in a moment. It's just very interesting, and it just reflects Cheryl's mindset and what the Otherworld is to her. Her personal hell is just being unable to move on from this. And a lot of the Otherworld happens with some sort of accident. Actually, shit, I just noticed that. The very first Otherworld after Sybil is in relation to Harry's car crash, and one of the first things you see is a crashed car that highlights the direction to go. In the hospital, this is after Carrie gets in a car crash on the bridge. Otherworld transition with Sybil. And the other one with Lisa dies of a head injury from a car crash. Otherworld transition with Sybil as she's getting more details. And this keeps repeating this cycle of giving you the imagery of dying from car crash imagery, something like that happening. A lot of car wrecks in this game, just getting left in abandoned cars getting wrecked. A whole lot of that in this game. Almost like her mind keeps forcing herself to look at that situation. And because it's related to Sybil, it could be her mind's way of trying to confront the truth of what happened. I don't know, like, I'm just kind of like spitballing something that just came off the top of my head immediately. So it's probably 100% bullshit, but what are you gonna do? But back to Sybil. I see Sybil as like the part of Cheryl that knows that she's just wallowing in the past. She's stuck back then, and just knows that being stuck wallowing in misery of the past, it's a bad idea. And it's trying to force her to accept the truth. And at the very end, Harry Mason died 18 years ago. No other world. Can't be frozen over anymore. Ain't escaping the truth this time. I don't know, like, very simple character overall, but I thought the execution was quite well done. Also another one that has 3 different versions based on what your choices are. And hers are the most dramatic, I find. But, now what do you do? And one final detail on Sybil Bennett. Notice how she is an authority figure trying to help and force Harry, in this case, to see the truth. Similar to how an authority figure, Dr. Kaufman, is trying to force Cheryl to see the truth. Very surface level, but, you know, I noticed it, so I may as well keep it in. Moving on. Now, briefly before we get to the last character of note, I just want to talk about the bartender. I don't know how to feel about the bartender, honestly. I got nothing to say for her. That's the thing. I think she is a mistake in the storytelling process, because not meeting Sybil at a very early point hurts the storytelling, in my opinion. Because the bartender never comes back again. Never says anything of real relevance. She's thematically insignificant. She's the odd piece out, and I have no idea why she was included at all. Like, if you have to have a scene for slacking off, taking you to the sports bar instead of the diner, have Harry meet Sybil at the bar, maybe like a beer in hand or something. I don't know, I don't know, just not meeting Sybil hurts the game's storytelling, in my opinion. because the bartender adds nothing. She has no purpose to the story. She's never brought up again. She's just gone from that scene. At the very least, with a character like John, who we'll get to in a second here, he only appears for one scene, but his one scene is to complement another character who is in quite a few, and actually has some relevance. I don't think the bartender has any thematic relevance. I could be wrong. I would love to hear someone's reading about what they believe the bartender means in context of the story, but yeah, I'm not seeing anything with her, honestly. Now we get to Michelle. Michelle was the new character added. She is the only one who does not have any analog parallel to Silent Hill 1. Brand new edition. And I like her a lot. I think she's very good for the sake of the story, as she is, outside of Dahlia, who seems almost like an insert in a really fucked up, creepy way, she is a direct reflection of Cheryl, specifically her view of her father, with how Michelle has this delusional view of her relationship with her boyfriend John, seeing it all with rose-tinted glasses, and years later, despite the fact that the whole long-distance thing clearly hasn't worked out, still refusing to accept that it is over. And I think specifically, in no matter what version of Michelle you get, or what version of that cutscene, John had a lot of what John says is what the game is about in a cold, hard way. We were delusional to believe something like this could work. It died years ago. You never loved me. You loved the idea of me. Direct parallel to Harry and how Cheryl views him. Cheryl doesn't know Harry the same way that Michelle in this example, excuse me for talking over myself again, she doesn't know John anymore. It was like, I can't remember the year, like how many years they've been apart. 5 years, I think they've been doing long distance, quote unquote. She doesn't know him. Or at least doesn't know him anymore. It was an idealistic relationship they had at one point, and life went on. Life moved on, and Michelle couldn't. And I think that's why it's very interesting that of all the characters, the only one I think is self-aware of almost what is going on in a very Twilight Zone kind of way is Michelle. She has a very strange line towards the very end, which I fucking love. Now, alongside those sort of Sybil scenes of like, I know you're not Harry Mason died 18 years ago, Sybil herself doesn't actually seem like she's aware of what's going on. For Michelle, it's a little less clear. During the scene at the very end in Annie's bar, yeah, she sits alone and just talks to Harry and says, it's over with John and I, and almost comes to accept, I was living a lie, I was living in a past that wasn't as great as I was making it up to be, with someone I don't really know, and we've moved on, and it's like we've moved on with our lives. She comes to terms with what she should have. She has some very interesting lines, something, I can't do it word for word, but she says something along the lines of, it's not feeling right anymore. Something's wrong, and I can't really put my finger on it, just about the situation in general. And when Harry says, like, I have to go find my daughter, I'm going to the lighthouse, I'm gonna find Cheryl, she's like, do you have to go, Harry? And he's like, look, I'm gonna find my answers there. And she just has this deadpan delivery of, you might not like them. And that's the last line dialogue her and Harry share. He's just gone, and he can't go back. Ooh, fuck, that's kind of eerie. That's that uncanny I'm talking about. Nothing about that line or that interaction screams stilted delivery. It's just the no sell of something like, you might not like the answers when you get them. Like she has some sort of knowledge Harry doesn't, because she probably does to some degree. If she is, as I think she is, on a direct allegory to Cheryl herself, coming to terms with the same situation Cheryl refuses to, I think there's a little something there. I don't know. And again, Michelle and her relationship with John, and it's just the delusion of how perfect it was, and then the reality of it all coming out at once. And just what I love about it is that it's quiet. They have one kind of blow up, which that's barely a fucking argument. Like, that is nowhere near the kind of blow up screaming matches you usually see. And it's true, like, we don't see what the conversation leads you after they get out of the car. Sure, we don't. But based on what they're doing there, I don't think it got that ugly. And the fact that she's very calm afterwards, like, it probably just became mutual. Like, yeah, like, this just wasn't working. Michelle just finally let the guard break. Again, all speculation. But it's just a slow fade away after. And Michelle and John, like, there's no drama to it outside of just the realistic shit, and there's no big blow up outside of just kind of raising their voices. It's just a sad, relatable little story. And it ties in with my final thoughts on Shatter Memories as a whole. Now, the themes of Shatter Memories, look, they've been well covered by, like, anyone who's ever done a review of this game in any degree. Talking about the story has talked about the themes, and the game itself makes them so clear. I just almost like hammering it down your throat by how in your face its themes are. It's about trauma, it's about the need to move on, idealization of a past that doesn't exist, living within said past and refusing to grow, all that stuff. Everyone talks about that. Everyone knows it. So, I can't really add much to that conversation. But, I'm going to say something about what stuck with me going back to Shatter Memories after so many years. I hadn't played it for years until I started doing the streams. And what really stuck with me after going back with it is... it's just... how do I put this? I guess what really struck me was how Shatter Memories just centers around the small tragedies of life and how there's no real unrealistic dramatic payoff, just life goes on afterwards, regardless of the lives hurt, harmed, or straight up ruined because of the events. I haven't mentioned the lore notes so far. Now, the note-based storytelling is something that survival horror games have had since Alone in the Dark, and Silent Hill has since the very beginning. And I mentioned, like, the notes of a lot of the games with 4 onward kind of missed the point, which for Silent Hill, in my opinion, was always background details about the world and little self-contained stories that help the themes of the game. Silent Hill 2 was a master of doing this. And I think Shatter Memories is quite good at it too. Honestly, I think it's damn good at it. Because I've never seen anyone try to take the lore notes, like the voice and text messages that you find all through the game, and try to make much of them, try to make sense of them. They usually just write it off as, oh, it's allegorical things in Cheryl's life, and that's it. Some of them are, yes. But one thing that they all have in common, all the little stories that you see, and there's so many that there's too many to get to, they all just enforce the theme of everyday tragedy. It's nothing as dramatic as something like Silent Hill 1's or Silent Hill 2's. Like the big core trauma that gives into those games' plot. It's nothing that big. It's all just everyday material. And there's just too many to list, but it's a common theme throughout almost all of them, if not all of them. A teenager getting drugged at a party far from home and calling her mother scared. A bride returning her wedding dress looking upset and just trying to get a refund on it. We don't ever know what her story actually was. A security guard getting stabbed by a troubled youth that he took pity on. It's just all of these small moments of realistic, real-world tragedy that happen every day, even in seemingly nice places. And they impact nothing. And that's what I love about them. They have no impact to the story. They have no impact to Harry's quest for Cheryl. And when we know the twist at the end, they really have no impact on Cheryl herself. Why? Because that's how life goes. And I think that's what Shattered Memories at the end of the day, if not is directly about, that to me is the takeaway when I think of Shattered Memories. Now, I'm not one of those people who's like, there's no hierarchy to pain, or making an argument like that. That's stupid. But if you actually speak to people, I do believe, to varying degrees, obviously, everyone's life is a unique tragedy. Everyone. To some degree or another. Obviously, sometimes there's very small degrees of it, but to some degree, everyone's life is a tragedy at some point. No matter how small it is in perspective, contextually, who knows what it is to them. And what tragedies do befall every single individual. It's gonna be forgotten. A lot of the big or small, it'll just be forgotten and unseen by everyone all around you. No matter how unique, no matter how special or intricate that this tragedy may be to your life, it is so tiny and minuscule in comparison to the billions of others on Earth, even just thousands around you, even just in that small microcosm, that even if for a moment that tragedy is a focus for everyone around you, and they'll pay attention, they'll move on, and you will too, because more are coming. It's unique like a snowflake. And I know that's going to get a lot of fucking memers in the comments talking about, yeah, special snowflakes. You put aside that bullshit for a second. Actually, let's think of the snowflake in the blizzard. It is special. It is intricate. But you can't really tell because you're surrounded by it. And in a storm, everyone is surrounded by it. In a lot of ways, that's not only is that everyone's life, but that's what the hell am I saying? I'm phrased it wrong. That's not only Cheryl's life in this instance, that's everyone's lives. No matter how important or tragic that scenario is, and don't get me wrong, 8 years old, death of your father after a divorce, goddamn, that's bad. But even within Cheryl's life, we knew there was bad things before that. And there were bad things after. Run-ins with the law. Affairs with educators. More happened after that. More tragedies. And like a snowflake in a storm, just disappeared. Because at the end of the day, that's what has to happen. You listening, anyone, they'll have tragedies beforehand. They'll have that. They're going to have tragedies maybe at the time of listening, and you're going to have it after too. Because that's the storm of life. And I think that's why Shattered Memories works the way it does. All of the little lore stories, all the little backstories that you can see mean nothing to Harry and Cheryl. The same way Cheryl's tragedies probably don't mean anything to anyone else. Even to Kaufman, to some degree, who I previously established did give a shit. But individually, does that mean anything to him? No. The person in front of him, wallowing in it does, but at the end of the day, that's because more of the storm's coming. And that's how life has to go on. Shattered Memories was a joy to go back to. And as fucking weird as it is after being all melodramatic for 10 minutes talking about tragedy and shit, it was a joy to revisit. And I used to be very critical of this. I played it a few times years and years ago, left it, and I thought, yeah, it's pretty good in certain elements, but it kind of screws up others. I think I underestimated how good it was at its best moments. And it is a somber but extremely captivating story. For me, it's head and shoulders the best Western Silent Hill game. This is the best of the whole walking simulator horror kind of thing. if you include this in the category of something like, I don't know, a Gone Home or a Layers of Fear or those kind of games, I think Shattered Memories is head and shoulders the best one. And this has been a treat. And as unfocused as all this has been, I hope it was okay to listen to. And I don't know, let me know if you want more focus in the future all the time, or if little unscripted thoughts like this aren't the worst thing in the world. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And again, thanks for listening.